Well, this year's celebration of the 70th anniversary of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights gives a special meaning to the work we have done in Malta earlier this year and the work which has been done by the Council of the Baltic States regarding the universal prohibition of corporal punishment. 2019 is another special year, as we will be celebrating the 30th anniversary since the most widely ratified UN Convention on the Rights of the Child when it came into being. Therefore, let's work harder to promote, to protect, and to prioritize the rights of each and every child. Our work is a statement on the importance that all of our countries are to remember that children's rights are first and foremost human rights. Coming to Stockholm is an ideal location for this conference and the presentation of the guidance papers, because as we all know, Sweden was the very first country in the world to enact a legal ban on corporal punishment in 1979. Furthermore, Sweden was also the very first country to hold a global conference on corporal punishment. Whenever we are united, we send a strong message within our countries and to the international community that all forms of violence against children are unacceptable. By continuing to endeavor with other countries, and I'm so very pleased that this conference has placed, or rather this two-year project, one would say, has put such an emphasis on the implementation now, a step further than simply legislating. So when we endeavor with other countries to put an end on corporal punishment, we safeguard the intrinsic human dignity and holistic well-being of our children and our societies. Although it is reassuring to note that 54 countries in the world have introduced legislation that prohibits all forms of corporal punishment against children. However, this is still much far away from the universal objectives and targets of ending the scourge of corporal punishment. Therefore, I would like to commend the efforts of the Council of the Baltic States for making such a significant contribution to strengthen the endeavors to encourage the implementation of the necessary legislation to end corporal punishment. With almost 4 decades worth of experience in this field, the Baltic countries are a perfect example to other nations who want to make the transition in favor of a zero-tolerance policy on violence against children. For this reason, I look forward to the wide dissemination of the guidance reports. Such publications are a valuable way of sharing good practices and experiences to inspire others to join us and embrace a culture of zero tolerance and policies in the best interest of our children. Furthermore, I'm confident that the outcomes of the Nonviolent Childhoods Project will provide a powerful toolkit for the international community to further instigate the effective implementation of legal bans on corporal punishment and strongly encourage much-needed policies. Let me use this opportunity to share with you some of our experiences in Malta and the steps being taken to safeguard the dignity and the well-being of our children. As signatories to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, Malta is committed to uphold legislation which protects children alongside policies for the social outreach, education, and emphasis on positive parenting. Legislation and effective strategies for the enforcement of the law are crucial. However, I believe that the most effective changes are those which also transform our cultures and our mentalities. For this reason, I am confident that the launch of the first National Children's Policy in Malta on Universal Children's Day last year will do much to empower professionals and families to provide children, especially the most vulnerable, with the necessary support. The National Strategic Policy for Positive Parenting, which covers the years between 2016 and 2024, is another measure to educate Maltese parents about non-abusive and non-violent forms of discipline. In this way, my government is encouraging a society that is more peaceful, more respectful, and more capable of meeting the complex needs of every child and their families. My foundation, that is the President's Foundation for the Well-Being of Society, and there are two very learned experts from my foundation, the Director General herself, Dr. Ruth Farrugia, and Dr. Sharon Attar de Giovanni. Both of them are present here and have been participating. Well, my foundation has contributed to our national discourse by being a strong advocate for children's rights and an internationally recognized champion for child participation. In fact, my foundation was a major factor that motivated the high-level global conference on the universal prohibition of corporal punishment, which was held in May in my country last year, well, this year. I would like to take the opportunity to commend Austria, who had held the preceding high-level global conference in 2016. I wish to take this opportunity to share with you the main outcomes of the conference held in Malta, which included contributions from international delegations alongside distinguished keynote speakers and expert panelists. Well, I must, and it is very important to commend in particular the participation of the Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General on Violence Against Children, my dear friend, Marta Santos Pais. Marta, my friend, your commitment to protect and defend vulnerable children is so inspiring. You never stop to surprise me with your infinite passion and determination to promote, to protect, and to prioritize the rights of each and every child. I am looking forward, in fact, to working closer with you to mark the 30th anniversary of the CRC in a very meaningful way. Well, the outcomes from the Malta Global Conference, which will be published in partnership with the Global Initiative to End All Corporal Punishment of Children, are scheduled to make a contribution to the next high-level global conference, which will take place in Tunisia in 2020. And I would like to take the opportunity to assure Minister Labidi, the Minister for Women, Families and Children of Tunisia, of our continuous support. I feel sure that we can count also of the continued support of the European Commission and the European Parliament Intergroup on Children's Rights. During the roundtable discussions and panel groups, the national delegations discussed a number of key areas that require further emphasis and an ongoing commitment, even from those countries, including Malta, who have legislated against corporal punishment. And I would like to briefly share with you the main thoughts expressed by all the participants in the Malta meeting. There was a focus on capacity building and the need for more guidance and training opportunities for professionals to work with and for children. During the deliberations, it transpired that some countries provide training for some professionals, such as supervision of psychosocial professionals and teacher support, while in other countries, it was mentioned that there are not even trained social workers available to provide the necessary support. Countries who can offer good practices should share and support other countries who are still building capacity, as is being done during this conference, in fact. Another point was the need of a constructive approach, such as investment in training the trainer programs that enable communities and societies to become empowered to provide the necessary services themselves. Another very valid point was providing immediate care, and how. Well, providing immediate care to a child who has been the victim of abuse and punishment should always take place in a child-friendly setting, it was said. A child-friendly setting which respects the voice and the experiences of the individual child. It was also recommended that the families in our respective countries should receive adequate care from specialized agencies working together to meet the complex and intersectional demands of each child and their family. Another important point was with regards to empowerment and education. And complementary to the training of professionals, it was said that child empowerment through education is a must to ensure that children know that corporal punishment is never acceptable. Our children cannot wait, and while parents need to be helped and empowered to make the right choices, children need to know that they have the right and the ability to report corporal punishment and to discuss their feelings and experiences. In this context, I would like to quote one of the conference participants who said, and I quote, "Discipline means to teach, but this has come to mean something negative. We need to teach children to solve problems and to know that violence does not solve any problems." So the need for awareness-raising initiative, access to information, and effective social mobilization were other important points raised by the conference participants. About positive parenting, parents need to be offered alternatives to corporal punishment, and underlying mentalities and cultural norms need to be challenged and transformed. Then another very important point, the need for strategy, legislation, and policies. So it was said that the necessary change in mentality and culture should take place by embracing a bottom-up approach to develop the necessary strategy, which should include awareness, education, and training, as well as a top-down approach to put in place effective legislation and policies. It also was said that we need to work in synergy on a national level, on a regional level, as is being done during this conference, and on an international level, as Marta does. Another important point which was mentioned during the conference was the benefits of cross-ministerial action plans on a national level. That is, working in synergy with the diverse ministries that actually can take effective action in this regard. Then an emphasis was put on the need of a culture change. So another recommendation was about the importance of the right language that should be used against corporal punishment, which should reflect also the local cultural context. However, the delegations acknowledged that while effective legislation is a necessary foundation, it is simply not enough. It is not the end of the journey, they said, but part of a longer process that involves policy changes and cultural transformations. Data and research was also mentioned by a number of participants, and they said that there is a cause for concern as there is insufficient data on this topic. Therefore, it was also recommended that collecting data and research is of utmost urgency and importance. There is the need for continuous assessment, they said, improved teamwork, longitudinal research, the promotion of cost effectiveness, and the provision of global tools to achieve our goals. So I look at the guidance reports as really a very good start for these, for the global tools that we need to achieve the necessary outcomes. Then child participation was mentioned, and it was said it is our duty as adults and authorities to empower our children to tell their own stories in their own way, as children are the experts on childhood, and their voices must be heard by our politicians, legislators, policymakers, and activists. Only then, it was said, only then can a top-down approach be successful in the developing the right strategy, legislation, and policy. So there was this emphasis that we need a bottom-up approach where children come to the table to share their experiences, to share their aspirations. So that then, it's only then that a top-down approach can be successful. Prevention was very much emphasized upon. In fact, participants emphasized the absolute importance of prioritizing prevention against corporal punishment. Our authorities, it was said, must budget for prevention, learning to see it as an essential investment in the holistic well-being of our children and our societies as a whole. Then obviously the best interest of the child was another very important point that was repeatedly mentioned during the conference. Well, all participants of the Malta meeting posed this important question. This is with regards to the best interest of the child. I think it is a very important question for all of us to make to ourselves, and also to share this and emphasize and push forward this question to our community leaders. As community leaders and decision takers, are we putting our children first in all of the processes that we are implementing? This was a question that was posed during the conference as a sort of benchmark when we are developing our policies, etc., to ask ourselves if we are truly putting children first in all of the processes that we are implementing. Well, so that was the end of the sharing, but I must say that I am truly proud of the space we created at the Global Conference in Malta for dialogue and to promote practical and policy-focused deliberations. Excuse me. I'm also very glad that this regional conference, like the Malta Global Conference, is providing a space for us to listen to the voices of children themselves. During the Global Conference in Malta, in fact, members of the Children's Council, the Young People's Council, and the Children's Consultation Group within my Foundation for the Wellbeing of Society shared their views and concerns. They definitely enriched us with their contributions and enlightened us. The participating children had a number of meetings where they discussed the subject of corporal punishment and shared their concerns that corporal punishment leads children to think of violence as acceptable. This was a very, very important point which was raised and emphasized by our children. The children also mentioned the importance of positive parenting. They said that loving and respectful parents were essential to break the vicious cycle, which is fueled by violence. The children of my foundation also shared their concerns for disadvantaged children who are in a position of increased danger, such as children with disabilities, they mentioned, children with learning difficulties, and even children in migration. They also emphasized on children in migration, that they are at an increased risk of violence. The participation of these children and young people gave further visibility to the importance of a zero-tolerance approach, which condemns all forms of violence against children. For this reason, I encourage all of us here today to ensure that the input of children is taken on board during all of our national, regional, and international deliberations in this sector. The Malta Global Conference concluded its work by signing a declaration. It was signed by many of the national delegations to prohibit corporal punishment in all its forms, and this gesture of goodwill strengthened our united position and further highlighted this issue on a global platform. We brought some copies with us, Noel, so we can distribute it, the copies of this declaration which was signed. However, I believe that we must do more to motivate those countries which still, unfortunately, have not implemented the necessary legislation and policies to join our important cause. In fact, ending all forms of violence against children is a fundamental prerequisite to effectively achieve the United Nations Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, and in particular, SDG number 16 and Target 2 mandates our countries to end abuse, exploitation, trafficking, and all forms of violence against children. And this, the Agenda 2030 has been approved by all of our countries, so we have a direct responsibility. We must take effective action to give visibility to the research which tells us that corporal punishment has adverse and long-term effects, not only on children, but also on our families, communities, and societies. We must promote strong and supportive policies for positive parenting to ensure that caregivers exercise discipline in dignified, respectful, and non-violent ways. Finally, we must continue to raise awareness about the rights of each and every child, first and foremost amongst our children themselves. Let me reiterate my firmly held belief that children are the experts on childhood, and their voices must be heard by our politicians, policymakers, community leaders, and activists. I strongly urge the international community to take effective and urgent action to ensure that violence against children is no longer considered normal or part of the status quo. And I think we are living in a world where we need to do much, much more, especially when we know that so many children, unfortunately, are on the run, unaccompanied. So this is another area where we need to really think and endeavor to ensure not only in our countries, but where we thank God we are not in conflict, but especially within those countries where children are truly on the run, unaccompanied, fleeing conflict and poverty. On concluding, I would like to state that if we are truly committed in our efforts to build peace among our nations, we must surely begin by making peace in our homes, in our schools, and in our communities. Violence against children can have no part in a global culture that affirms the values of dignity, of justice, and of peace. Let's ensure that we can celebrate the 30th anniversary of the CRC next year in the most convincing of ways. We need to endeavor harder to stand up for our children and to ensure that our children are given the much-needed space to become effective, valued contributors to human dignity and universal human rights. Thank you.